What is a good strategy to help you expand upon the vocabulary that you already know? We're going to talk about that coming up. How can I learn more vocabulary words? How can I expand that vocabulary? This is one of the top questions I get from students on a regular basis. And my response is, tell me specifically why you need to learn more vocabulary. What is it specifically that you're looking to do? For example, are you learning English as a hobby, where you've got a lot of time and you can work slowly? Or is it the night before an English exam and you have to memorize 60, 70, 80 words? In this video, we're going to talk about long-term acquisition, acquiring new vocabulary words, so we can recall them for the long term. If you're in that situation where it's the night before an English exam and you need to memorize 60 or 70 words, we can do that. Just tell me in the comments and I can make a video for how to do that too, because that can be done. Now, to acquire more vocabulary and to make sure you can retain it for the long term, I want you to remember 3 things. Do a little, do it slow, and do it often. This is the approach for a long-term acquisition, a long-term practice of English. Remember, learning English, it's a practice. It's not a destination. Let me ask you, how often do you forget things? Not just vocabulary, but a special date, a shopping list, an idea that you had, a book or a song title? Well, if you're like me, you forget things regularly, not just vocabulary. That's why I carry one of these, a notebook, a pocket-sized, simple-to-use notebook. It is easy, simple, and should not be underestimated. I recommend carrying this with you at all times. Now, your smartphone can do everything a notebook can, but I feel that the act of writing helps me remember more. Plus, when I use my smartphone, I have to type in my password, then I have to open the app, and then I have to fight with the autocorrect. When I use the notebook, I don't have to worry about autocorrect. I can just write what I want to write. And it's easy, it's quick, it's accessible. Anytime you encounter a word that you don't know, I want you to write it down in this book and save it for later. Try this for a week and you'll see just how beneficial it can be. Now, after you've written down a new word, remembering this word works best when you can connect it to something that's personal to you, something you already know. When we learn new vocabulary words, we try to connect them to another word, a thought, an idea, a concept, something that has meaning to you. So for example, let's say you're having a hard time remembering the word hurricane. For whatever reason, hurricane is difficult for you to remember. Now, how can you get past this? How can you work at this? How can you get to a point where you can recall hurricane on a moment's notice without any hesitation? When I think of the word hurricane, thoughts that come to mind are havoc, destruction, wind, water, insanity. And the word insane comes to my mind. And I notice that insane rhymes with hurricane. So I have a connection there. Insane hurricane, hurricane insane. I've created a connection. Now, what do I do with that connection? That's right. Write it in the notebook. Write down your connection. You've got your word, you've got your connection, and you've taken the time to write both of those down. All of this is building a mind pattern that's going to help you recall the word a lot easier in the future. Or When I picture a hurricane, when I think of the image of a hurricane, I notice that a hurricane is the only kind of major storm that has an eye. It has this calm center in there. And I find that pretty interesting. To me, that's interesting. A storm that has this calm center. And so I think the eye of a hurricane. And I've made a connection there. Something that I find interesting, something that has a meaning to me, is that eye. So I have a much better time, a much easier time remembering the word hurricane when I have something to visualize and connect it to. Next, where can you go to find new vocabulary words in a way that is interesting, in a way that's not just reading through a dictionary and getting bored? I recommend going to Google News, because Google News has got news stories in English about anything that you want. Anything that you have an interest in, whether it's books or music or art. It doesn't have to be politics. It can be if you're interested. You can find a current article about anything you're interested in. Maybe it's technology. Maybe you're interested in smartphones and you want to see what's the latest with Apple. I would recommend, depending upon your level of English, reading one article per week. It just has to be a few paragraphs. See if you can find one or two words in that article. Once you find your one or two words, what do? Write it in the notebook. Maybe you're going through an article that has got a lot of words you don't understand, and that's fine. Just pick one or two. Don't overwhelm yourself with having to write out 10 or 20 words. Remember, this is a long-term practice. We're looking to acquire this language for the long term. So we want to make sure that we take our time by doing a little bit, doing it slow, do it often. My next tip: in order for vocabulary to be useful, it has to be memorable. It has to be memorable. So we expand on this concept by creating the mini story. And a mini story is nothing more than a 3 or 4 sentence paragraph. Something that, again, has meaning to you. For example, let's say you came across the word unintelligible. Unintelligible. It's a mouthful. And unintelligible means not understood. So you start by writing down the word in your notebook. You look up the definition. You write that down. Next, you connect the word to an idea or a concept or something that has meaning to you. For example, the word unintelligible reminds me of my friend David. David always mumbles when he speaks. That kind of thing. So when I say, "Hey David, how was your weekend?" he responds by saying, "Well, we got pretty good, not too much going on." Really? Okay, I didn't understand much of that, but I think I got it. I think I got it. So my mini story would go something like this. David and I are sitting at a restaurant. Above David is a sign that says unintelligible. David tells me about his weekend. As David mumbles, I see the sign and I can't stop laughing. I've created a mini story based on my new vocabulary word. I've got this 4-sentence story that has an entire context around the word unintelligible. A mini story only needs to be 3 to 4 sentences long. Having my friend David in my mini story is meaningful to me because I know him. He's not some abstract character. I know David, so anytime I think of unintelligible, I always laugh and think of that sign. Now, one tip for your mini stories are to make them strange. Make them weird. Why? Because it's easier to remember things that are strange, things that are weird. There would probably never be an actual sign up above somebody that read unintelligible, but that doesn't matter. Your stories don't need to be logical. They need to be memorable. And a strange story is memorable. Now at this point, you've found a new word that you don't know. You've written it in your notebook. You've written the definition out. You've come up with a connection. You've connected that word to something. You've created your mini story. You have built this entire word profile. Much more than just a word and a definition. You have an entire profile for this word. This is much more effective at remembering vocabulary long term than writing the word and looking up the definition. Because now you have a context that means something to you. You're now in a good position to remember this word. But as time goes by, what happens? You forget your new word. And you know the saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. In order to get around this, we practice by recapping. Recapping is reviewing. Every 3 to 4 days, before you go to bed, or right when you wake up, get your notebook. Get your notebook out. Flip through the pages slowly. Go through each word. Read it a few times. Every 3 to 5 days. As you do this, you'll be reinforcing your mind of the connection, of the mini story, of the definition, of the way a word sounds. You're constantly feeding your subconscious mind all of those connections. So your vocabulary will last. It will stay much longer. But you might say, how long do I have to do this for? How long do I have to keep reviewing and recapping? And there's 2 answers to this. Number 1 is always. And number 2 is until you feel you don't have to anymore. Until those words are easy to recall. Until you don't have to worry about, oh, I know this word. What was it? Until that passes. But remember, English is a practice. It's not a destination. Okay? Acquiring a language is a practice, a lifelong practice. That's why in this video, we talk about the long-term approach for acquiring new vocabulary words and being able to remember those words for the long term. It's a slow process. 2 vocabulary words a week is fine. Read 1 article a week. Pull 2 vocabulary words out of it. Write them down. Write down the definition. Think of how to connect those words to an idea, a concept, or another word. Once you have that, you can create your mini story that gives more of a context around the word. And by doing all of these things and then reviewing again and again, once every 3 to 5 days, those words will stay with you much longer. And you'll notice it. So try this method. I think you'll have success with it. It requires a little bit of effort, but what doesn't? It also requires building the habit of doing a little bit each day. But that's no problem. That's nothing you can't handle. Now, before we go, I have the notes for this video down below in the comments. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And I want to know, what strategies for learning vocabulary long term have worked best for you? Tell me in the comments. Until our next video, keep practicing, keep focusing. I think this method is going to help you. I wish all of you out there a wonderful and fantastic day. You're amazing, and we'll see you next time.